Hello everybody, it's Caleb here with part 2 of my DMX and Unreal Engine video series. In the last video I showed you how to get your project set up and make your first basic fixture. And then in this video I'm going to show you how to make a basic fixture in Blender and then add a light and bake the lighting into that lens's texture. Let me show you the reason why we want to do this. In these fixtures we have just a solid white texture lighting up the lens. Now we could make this better by adding perhaps a honeycomb texture and then adding a single light into each of a single LED pixel inside each of those honeycombs. In fact, I might do that for this lens light. But what we're going to build is something much simpler. We're going to build this box light and it's going to mimic a cob LED. And then on the inside we're going to put a single light source, and then I'm going to actually show you how to build what looks like an arc lamp if you want to build more of a moving light. We're going to calculate all of that lighting in Blender, and then we're going to apply it to the 2D texture called the UV map that lays over this three-dimensional reflector cup. And then that emissive material is going to be used in the emissive material of the light fixture. Let's get started because there's a lot of little steps in this that I want you to get the hang of, and that's why I made this fixture build so simple. Hope you guys enjoy. If you want to see more content just like this, give this channel a subscribe and then give this video a like because it really helps me and the channel out. Thanks everybody, hope you enjoy. Alright, let's get started. We are in a new Blender project and there's a couple setup things to do. The first is to delete our directional light, as this will interfere with our lighting when we go to bake our lighting texture into our lens or into our reflector. The second is to position our camera. So let's click on our camera and then click on this arrow so that we can access its transform. We're going to zero out its X and Y and then actually take its Z out a little bit so that it's out of the way. We're also going to zero out its rotation so that it's pointing straight down. After that, we're going to set our baking settings. So we're going to go into our render tab and then change our render engine to cycles. And the difference between those two is that one is a lot more heavy in ray tracing and takes longer to render, and then the other, Eevee, is more kind of tailored to video games and it's a lot more real time. So we want to also change our sample rate on cycles to a much lower number. This is how many times it's going to allow light to bounce. So let's lower this to 128 because we're not going to need many light bounces. The next thing is to go down here to bake. And then we need to change view from to active camera. What this is going to do is when we bake our lighting, it's going to take it from this camera's perspective, which if you want to view, you can press 0 and that will show that camera's perspective. Now we need to create two materials, one for our lens and one for our body. But first we need to make the cutout that's going to serve for our fixture, or that's going to serve for our reflector. So let's go to add and create a cylinder, but before we do that I want to hide our cube so that we can see this sphere, because it's going to serve as the cutout for our reflector. Now one rule of thumb is that you don't want many rings or segments. So I'm going to lower this to 16 segments. I've had pretty good luck with 16 rings, but if you need to lower that because you're getting artifacts, then I would do so. What happens if you have 32 rings is your renders might look something like this, where you get weird grid shapes and dark spots. Once we have that, we can unhide our cube and we can click away to confirm the creation of this sphere. Then click on the sphere and press G and Z to raise it up. And then I would press S to scale it in just a little bit. I'm using my mouse to scale it in. Once I do that, then I need to apply this shape to this body. So I'm going to click on our body, and I'm going to go to the wrench, and this is our modifier. Click on the Boolean, and our object is going to be this sphere. After that, you can hide your sphere, look at your cutout, and then hit apply. Now note that I'm using this box. This is because I don't want to go into too much detail with the fixture right now. We'll do that after I get the light bake across, but I want to cut to the point and have no distractions for this operation. So the next we need to separate the materials and then UV map it. So if we notice we have one material here, if we hold Z and go to material preview, we can see that this is every single polygon on the shape. So we're going to click on our object and then hit tab, and there's two ways to select all of the polygons in your reflector. The first, if your object is pretty simple, you can just hold shift, and then with face selected right here, just deselect all of the faces that don't apply to your reflector. Your other option, if your object is a little bit more complex, is to use the brush tool. So press W, and if you don't see that circle, just keep pressing until you get to it. And then this will give you a radius option to select cylinders. The other thing you might need to do is to select faces one by one if your fixture is more built up, and press H to hide them so that you can actually access your reflector. Once you do that and you have all of these selected, you can press A and then hit Alt H, and lo and behold, we still need to select our faces. Anyway, all of these options will work. Your goal is to get to this point where all of your reflector's faces are selected. We're going to hit plus, new, and then label these. So this one's going to be our lens, and we're going to hit assign here, and then this one is going to be called our body. Our lens, we have to turn this base color up because we want it as bright as possible, and then we want to raise our metallic to almost all the way up and our roughness to almost all the way down. Now we have something that looks like a reflector, but it's still going to absorb a little bit of the light that hits it. The next thing we need to do is UV map this. We already have all of our faces selected, so just go to lens and press select. From here, you can go to UV editing tab and then just press UV and unwrap. I'll go into a bit more advanced UV editing later on in the build. What you do want to do though is take this UV map here and press S to scale it in just a little bit. After that, the last thing we need to do, hopefully, is press shading and then add in a new image texture. So this will be the image that our light bake is stored to. So hit new, and then I would call this something like light bake. And then this width and height is fine. I would take away this alpha layer here because it's not going to be used and it's going to raise your file type. Once you do that, I'm going to go through my checklist here. We have deleted our directional light, positioned the camera. We have not added a light though. We have set our baking settings on cycle CPU and set it to the active camera. Changed this number, separated our materials. So we need to add a texture node and then add our light. So with your lens material selected, You can navigate between the two using this slot option. Hit add and then click search and type image for image texture. Now this node doesn't have to be connected to anything, but we do have to click this drop down arrow here and add in our light bake image. And we still need to add a light. So let's hit add. Light and go, we will add a point light. We're gonna add the cylinder I showed earlier. We're gonna add that later. So go to modeling, and then you can press G and Z to drag this point light up. And I like to get it, you can hit Alt Z to go into X-ray mode, and then hit 1 or 3. I like to get this point light just above the reflector. And then if you can press Z and go to rendered, you can see that it is reflecting off the edges. Now one thing we also want to do is click on our light and go to its options and then raise its radius to cover this entire reflector. I do have to elaborate on this concept a little bit. This radius here does not represent how far out the light goes into the world. What it represents is how large the light source is. So for instance, a arc lamp would actually have a very tiny radius. Very small, smaller than the bulb itself. An incandescent lamp would have a slightly larger radius, and then the sun would have a gigantic radius. A VL3000 lens would be somewhere around, even though the arc lamp itself is the emitter, the actual radius of the light would be about probably 0.3 of a meter. So that's what I mean in radius. When it comes to effect it has on the actual light bake, let me show you. And there's the result of it with a smaller light source, as opposed to a larger light source that looks like this. So I definitely like the smaller light source better. But if this is something you're going for, then a larger light source is what you would want. So it looks like we are set to bake. Once you have everything set, I would go to the shading tab, select your fixture, and then make sure that your image node is selected. When you hit bake, it's going to look for what image nodes you have selected here, and then bake to all of those. So go ahead and press bake. I do want to increase the brightness of this light. And then to make things faster next time, under render, I'm going to lower this to 32 samples. So let's go to our point light and then raise this to more like 50, or I think 35 was the number I had last time. Just add that cylinder I mentioned. So one easy way to do it is to hit in object mode, hit add, cylinder, and then hold or press S to scale it in. We're going to press GZ to move it up, RX to rotate on the X-axis, and then 90 to turn it. We're going to hit S for scale and then X for the X-axis, and then do SY afterwards for the Y-axis. We're going to go SX.2. and then SY 0.2. Let's not do that. Let's go SZ 0.2. And then SY is actually going to be, we're going to scale that up by about 2.5, maybe even 3 times. That looks good. I'm going to scale that up a little bit bigger. So S 1.3, or I'll do SY 1.3. There we go. And then this needs a material as well. So we're going to hit materials, new, and then emission, we just have to turn this up, and then turn this emission strength to 35. Then we can hit, or Z, and go to solid view, so we can go into X-ray view, and then press 1 or 3, and then press G for grab and Z on the Z-axis to lower this all the way down. Now we can view it in rendered again, and then bake our lighting again. Note that I had my cylinder selected. So now with my fixture selected, we'll try this again. And that's the effect that that rod has. So I do like that. Kind of want that to be a bit more pronounced. So I'm just going to press S on this rod and scale it way up. And then something's going on with my light here. So I think I'm going to need to crank up this intensity a little bit. It looks like I got a bit too bright there. It's looking better. Let's back off this. Click on this image and hit save. Save it to somewhere you'll remember. And then we also want to go to File, Export, FBX, and then with our cube selected or our fixture, name this your fixture type, and then turn on Limit to Selected Objects. And then I like to put it right into the project directory. All right, now we're in Unreal Engine and we are going to build our fixture. So we have our cube folder, and in here we have our fixture cube static mesh, and then our body and lens materials. What we need to do is go to our panel light, which was the last fixture we made, and this is sort of going to be our master fixture. You could even probably just copy this to your content fixture, but for now we're going to hop from fixture to fixture, just making these fixtures more advanced as we go. So we're going to click on this light and drag it to our cube folder and say copy here. Then here, this is going to become our cube fixture. So we're going to call this BP_cube fixture. Let's drag this out into the world. It looks like a panel light right now, but it won't soon. And then let's go into the editor. So there's a couple things we need to change. Usually when you go into these blueprints, you have to kind of travel in. Sometimes it could be a road trip. So, first off, the static mesh for the body needs to change. Now we can just reference our fixture. So we could either type fixture cube into here or just drag and drop. And then if we do that, we need to reset our scale to 1. Now we have our fixture. And we need to, let's work on the materials real quick. So the body material needs to get assigned to the body. And then the lens material is already assigned, it just seems that link didn't come across, but we need to edit this. So the one folder we do need is, or the one file we need is this lighting bake image. We need to drag it and drop it. And then we need to drag and drop this onto our, drag and drop that texture into our lens material. This is going to get multiplied by our parameter here. We already have a parameter in, we just need to rename it to DMX it's just DMX space color. That's the word we're using for DMX color, logically. So then this RGB gets multiplied by this DMX color. And this sort of acts like a black and white mask on where to emit light stronger than other spots. Then this gets fed to our emissive color and we disconnect our base color completely. Let's save that. And then when we look at our cube fixture, we can see that it has this lens-like material when it's lit up. Now what we're gonna do is we need to refactor our parent hierarchy right here. So under lens, we're going to delete the old lens that we had. There we go. Then the other thing we need to do, and I messed this up on the last run, is because we parented our beam to a lens that was scaled down, when we unparented it, it changed the scale of this beam. So this needs to be reset back to 1. If this beam is not 1, it's gonna get messy. After that, we need to turn the beam around. And I want to use snapping for that. And then move this up into position. And this usually needs to be done from the side. And then the next thing, we need to isolate this material instance and give it its own variety. So let's find, well, we don't need to find this material instance. What we need to find is our master texture that we made, and that would be in our copy content. So here we have our beam master. So let's right click this and make another material instance and then call this mi underscore cube light beam. Now I mentioned a bug last time where the material instance kept on getting unbound from its fixture, and somebody in the comments said that they had the same thing. That might be because you're using a material instance. So if that keeps happening, what you could try is just duplicate this actual material here and then move to duplicate this entire material and then assign that instead of a material instance. That might help. We're going to Unreal 5.3 now, so obviously some changes are being made. So this has been working for me using a material instance, and it's more efficient, so I'm gonna go with it for now. Now, I accidentally hit compile, and now we have this icon. But what we need to do is move this material instance to our cube folder, and we can move that now. And then our material instance gets assigned right here, so we can drag and drop that as well. And then we need to fix the blueprint errors before we continue now. So the first is that the lens doesn't exist. So I knew that error would be here. The old lens that we had when we were using primitive objects doesn't exist anymore. So this now doesn't get used. And we can just delete this. The other spot the lens came up is when we changed the vector parameter on the materials, and now that is just body. That material exists on the body now. The other thing we need to do, which we haven't added in the viewport yet, is, well, I don't think we need to change this to a spotlight this time. Let's save that for next time. In the next video, I'm going to model a VL0, and it's going to be a moving light, and we're going to build our own moving light. When I do that, then I will play with a spotlight, using a spotlight here instead of a rectangle light. So the last thing we need to do, now that we can see our model again, is modify this material instance so that it looks good on the fixture. And luckily we get a preview right here. So I would just align this to your viewport. And so the things we're going to need to adjust are the DMX lens radius. And again, this is a 2D object we're looking at here technically, I think. So it just has to look right from most angles from a distance. That's all we really need to change. Let's go ahead and save this. And then our cube fixture is complete. Now, if we go to our event graph, we can give this a false value to test that everything is working. I did that wrong. So let's give this a yellow value, 255. We'll go 170 and 30. So this should come up a palish yellow. There we go. So one thing I forgot to include in here is on this lens material, just like in Blender, how we set the metallic and roughness layers, you can set that in Unreal Engine, and I would set them to their full values. So hold 1 on your keypad and then click to make a standard integer value. And then we're going to run this one into metallic and give it a value of 1. And then we're going to make a second one, run it into our roughness, and give it a value of 0. The other thing I want to do is show you guys what a darker light bake looks like, because I made the light bakes a bit too bright in this one. So here's a darker one. So let's save that and I'll show you guys the difference. Now when we go, it's a lot less washed out there. And if we back up, we can still see our dot. Perhaps that should be brightened up, so a compromise could be found between these. But this is your project, so I don't want to dictate too much. I just want to show you guys what the metallic looks like, because it looks pretty. So anyway, that is everything I want to show you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and if you like what you saw, subscribe and leave this video a like, because it helps me, it helps the channel. And I'm going to be back with more content along the lines of connecting DMX to Unreal Engine. I think my next video is going to be using Niagara particles, so that's going to be a fun one. Tune in next time. Thanks, everybody.